nonprofit public affairs network, engaging the citizens of Wisconsin since 2007 through access to government proceedings and public policy events.
Alrighty, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Sydney. I'm the Communications Director for Senator Melissa Agard. I just need a couple seconds to change some recording permissions for folks, and then we will get started. So bear with me for just 30 seconds. Alrighty, I've got everyone, I believe. If for some reason it's not working, please shoot me a private message in the chat. We ask that you please keep yourself on mute to preserve audio quality until questions at the end. We do have a hard stop at 10:55 today. So if we don't get to your question or you have follow-up, please follow up with offices individually. The contact information is on the media advisory we sent out yesterday. So without further ado, it is my honor and privilege to introduce Senator Melissa Agard.
Hi, I'm Senator Melissa Agard from the 16th Senate District here in Dane County, and I want to thank all of you for being here with us today. I am honored to be joined today by Attorney General Josh Kaul and Senator LaTonya Johnson. We are here today to call on the Republican leaders and our Republican colleagues to support crucial gun safety measures that Governor Evers included in his biennial budget, including expanding universal background checks on all gun sales, emergency protective restraining orders, and grants to reduce gun violence in our communities. Reduce all violence in our communities, sorry. As we see life beginning to return to normal after the COVID-19 pandemic, we have also unfortunately seen a drastic rise in mass shootings across our country, and in fact, right here in the state of Wisconsin. Going to a grocery store, to work, a place of worship, a playground, it shouldn't cause or create anxiety or fear for one's safety. We shouldn't have to worry about dropping our kids off at school out of concern that the next mass shooting might be occurring right there. These are uniquely American problems. This doesn't occur in other countries anywhere at any close to the same rate as it occurs here in our nation. And it is past time that policymakers take steps to free our communities from this gun violence epidemic. The fact is, the only place that addressing gun violence is a partisan issue is in state capitals. The people of Wisconsin know that those who skirt our gun laws using loopholes are doing a disservice to responsible gun owners everywhere. It's common sense to prevent domestic abusers and felons from purchasing weapons using the gun show loophole. That's why we need universal background checks on all firearm purchases. It's common sense to prevent people that are threatening to harm themselves and others from having access to guns. And that's why we support extreme risk protective orders. It is clear that our friends and neighbors across the state want pragmatic gun safety reform. Public approval in Wisconsin and nationally shows overwhelming support for these measures to close loopholes and address America's lax gun laws. It's also clear that there are societal and fiscal impacts to gun violence. In fact, recent research has revealed that the annual cost of gun violence in the United States exceeds $229 billion with a B, billion dollars. This includes direct costs such as hospitalizations for victims and incarceration costs for perpetrators. But it also includes indirect costs, including victims' quality of life, such as lost wages, and the cost to government programs that supplement those with significant injuries. This is a moral and fiscal issue. And because of this data, it should be easy to keep this provision in the state budget. I cannot and I will not ever treat gun violence and mass shootings as inevitable. Inaction is an admission that this is a fate for our state and our nation, and that's unacceptable. It's complex, but it's not complex at the same time. We know exactly what will save lives. Too many senseless deaths, too much unfathomable grief has occurred. Let's work together to make this state safer with simple but impactful gun safety legislation. I know that with these steps, we can reduce gun violence, we can slow illegal gun sales, and we can create safer communities, all while still protecting the rights and liberties of responsible gun owners in Wisconsin. It is time to stop talking and start doing. Common sense gun safety reforms must be a priority for all public servants in Wisconsin. And now I'd like for you to hear from my colleague, Senator LaTonya Johnson.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm Senator LaTonya Johnson. I represent the 6th Senate District. So far this year, for 2021, Milwaukee has had 24 homicides. 96% of those were due to gun violence. In 2020, Milwaukee had 189 homicides, 700 non-fatal shootings as of December 16th, and the Milwaukee Police Department confiscated over 3,000 guns. One of those victims of last year's homicide was a 20-year-old individual named Miles Laster. Miles Laster was the son of my girlfriend. He was just 20 years old. Miles was the youngest of 3 children. I want to read a statement that his sister posted on Facebook the day after Miles was shot. Yesterday, me and my brother had lunch. He went to Wingstop. I don't even like that food, but I ate it anyways. We sat down, we talked. He left and I left. I made it home. He didn't. Oh God. Gun violence costs on average about $1 million per incident. That's with the cost of police investigation, hospitalization, healthcare costs, disability, prosecution, and confinement. By December 4th, 2020, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel had estimated the cost of Milwaukee's gun violence was $1 billion. Yesterday marked the 20th mass shooting in 2 weeks. No longer can we ignore this issue. This is a crisis, and it's a crisis of enormous magnitude, and it's costing the state billions of dollars. We can no longer seem to just want to ignore this as writing it off as an urban issue. It's not. It's a Wisconsin issue. And it's time that we do our part to protect the citizens of Wisconsin and to make sure that no other parent has to go through the trauma that my girlfriend and her family faced. She has her good and her bad days, but the most concerning day for me was the day that she received the autopsy report for her son. My girlfriend is a nurse, and she's done like so many African Americans in the city of Milwaukee. She moved to the suburbs to protect her children, and particularly her 2 Black sons. They lived in Brown Deer. But when she got the autopsy report, and it showed that her son had been shot through the head, and that the gunshot had bounced in between his skull, she fell to the floor and was inconsolable and could not be picked up. Because of her nursing background, she knew exactly the type of trauma that caused her son. She knew immediately that even if he had survived, he would not have been the same. Far too many parents in this state know what it's like to lose a child to gun violence. And some of those parents know what it's like to lose multiple children. It's time that this legislature do its part This item needs to be kept in the budget, and it's time that Wisconsin says that enough is enough. And now I'll turn it over to our AG, Josh Kaul.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Thank you, Senator Agard, both for being here today to discuss this critical issue and for your continued leadership on the fight against gun violence and to protect public safety. Thank you to everybody else who's joining us here today as well. My top priority as Attorney General is public safety. And part of that responsibility, I think, of protecting public safety is speaking out when there are changes that we can make to our laws that will make our communities safer. The problem of gun violence is one where there are changes we can make. We know that gun violence continues to be a problem for our communities. We have seen 2 very significant mass shootings in just the last few weeks. And as we return to normal from this pandemic, we need to be aware that we are going to face public safety challenges. There have been significant mental health strains. There have been significant strains on people struggling with substance use disorder from the isolation that people have had amid this pandemic. And as I believe President Obama said, we can't go from defeating the pandemic and escaping that crisis to going back into the epidemic of gun violence. We need policies that are going to make our communities safer. In Wisconsin, the vast majority of firearm purchases right now have to go through background checks. Many of those are conducted by the Wisconsin Department of Justice. That is entirely consistent with firearm owners' rights to possess a firearm. But our laws have loopholes in them that allow some people, when they obtain a firearm, to avoid a background check. One of the things we are calling for is to close those loopholes and to make sure that we have comprehensive background checks in Wisconsin so that every firearm purchaser has to go through the same basic background check process. This is an issue that the public is fully supportive of. There is widespread support to find ways to avoid taking up this issue, not just not to vote on this issue, but not even to have hearings on this issue. So I applaud Governor Evers for including common sense gun safety measures in his budget proposal this year. And what I want to encourage all the reporters here to look at and to call Republicans in the legislature out on is they're going to say that they're taking policy items out of the budget, that they're going to just focus on fiscal items. Well, I have 2 responses to that. First, this is something that cannot wait. We had 2 mass shootings just in recent weeks. This isn't something that should revolve around a legislative schedule. This is something that should happen now. And if it's not going to be done in the budget, legislators should take it up through standalone legislation now rather than waiting months and months. Secondly, if this budget isn't the right time, what is the right time? Because in the last legislative session, we saw standalone legislation introduced. I stood with Senator Agard when she was Representative Agard in the last legislative session. I stood with Senator Johnson when we were calling for legislation to be passed, and nothing happened. And then the governor called a special session, and nothing happened. So these process arguments we're hearing about the budget and that we're going to hear, those are legislators trying to hide from the merits of these issues because they don't want to address them, because they know that we need these measures. So if you hear those process arguments, I want to encourage everybody to ask them, if it's not now, when are they going to take these issues up? So I hope the legislature will finally act on these issues, that they will listen to the majority of Wisconsinites, and that they will do the right thing for public safety, and that they will pass comprehensive background checks and other common sense gun safety measures in this legislative session. So again, thank you to everybody for joining us. And with that, I think we are happy to open this up for questions.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. If you have the raise hand function, please raise your hand and I will call on you as such. Otherwise, drop your name in the chat and I will call on you that way as well. Yes, Elise, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for holding this. Just wondering, quick question about some of these changes, how do people who, regularly purchase guns or use some of these guns for, sports or recreation, how do you know that those people are not going to be closed out from some of these new laws or these new provisions that'll be in there? The people who say they'll be using these for those recreational purposes, how do we know that those people are not going to be locked out of these background checks, that they won't be too strict for people like that?
I can talk about that. Right now, there are laws in place that prohibit people in certain circumstances from owning a firearm. If you've been convicted of certain crimes, for example, there are prohibitions. What the background checks do is make sure that if somebody's trying to purchase a firearm, that there's somebody who is legally authorized to obtain that firearm. And the vast majority of firearm purchases go through the background check process in Wisconsin. My agency conducts many of those background checks. The problem is our laws are written in a way that allows a small percentage of firearm purchases to avoid the background check process. So people who are not allowed to legally obtain a firearm can try to get one in a way that doesn't require them to go through that same background check. The legislation that was proposed in the last session that's included in the governor's budget would close those loopholes and make sure that everybody who's getting a firearm has to go through the same background check process, so that if they are prohibited from owning a firearm, that they're not allowed to get the firearm.
Awesome. Thank you, Elise. Does anyone else have any other questions?
I just wanted to add too that Milwaukee has a gun court, and I had the opportunity to go and sit in gun court for pretty much half a day. I wanted to see what the backgrounds were of those individuals that were coming up and were being charged, and how the sentencing actually works. And I have to be honest, the majority of the people that came through gun court were felons in possession of a gun. And it wasn't just one occurrence or two occurrences, it was repeat. And for those individuals to get their hands on guns that they are not eligible for, the question has to come up, how did they get access? These individuals are not going to Carbella's and purchasing these guns because they would not pass the background check. A lot of them are buying their guns online, where you can go to armslist.com, buy a weapon, and you don't have to disclose if you're a convicted felon. They're not asking. And so it was just so shocking for me to sit there and to see the type of offenses these individuals were charged with, and the fact that they were convicted felons and they were continuously getting their hands on guns, something that they were clearly prohibited from doing legally by law.
All right, Mayan Silver, I think I saw your hand up. I'm gonna ask you to unmute. There we go.
Yeah, I was wondering if you are hearing from any Republicans that they are going to accept any or part of these measures, and if you're having negotiations with specific Republicans, what they're saying, if anyone would be getting on board with this.
I think I'll start off first, and then Melissa. For me, the 8 years that I've been in this building, that has continuously been the problem. I have been successful at passing legislation that created additional penalties for individuals that were violent offenders and caught in possession of a gun, but nobody wants to do anything about background checks, even though 80% of Wisconsinites agree. And that is something that continuously needs to be addressed. We can't keep turning a blind eye to these victims and their families. Over 700 non-fatal shootings in the city of Milwaukee, 189 fatal shootings. Just Milwaukee alone shows that this is an issue. It continues to be an issue, and it definitely needs to be addressed.
So I've been in the Capitol as long as LaTonya, and for the time that I was in the Assembly, and then now that I have moved into the Senate, it is clear that folks in our districts, regardless of who it is that they're voting for Republican or for Democrats, do support firearm reforms, safety reforms to occur in the state of Wisconsin. And because Governor Evers has worked so hard to hear the voices of the people of the state of Wisconsin and has looked at the numbers and not only the moral costs and the loss of life, but the effect to our finances and our financial situation in the state of Wisconsin, Governor Evers included these provisions in his state budget because he knows it's right for Wisconsin in a three-dimensional way. And we don't exactly know what it is that our Republican colleagues are going to do with the budget. We have Senator Johnson here, who is a member of the Joint Finance Committee, but probably they're not even talking to her because she's part of the minority party. What we know is that this does save money and it saves lives, and it is the right thing for Wisconsin. And the governor has put together a budget that really prioritizes and lifts up the people of our state and provides safety and security and a trusting relationship with government. So I am hopeful that my colleagues on the Joint Finance Committee and the majority party take into consideration the thought that the governor has put into creating this budget and continue to include these provisions as they move forward. And that's what we're here for, is we're here as leaders in the state of Wisconsin to implore on our Republican colleagues to support the governor's budget and to support these provisions. And if they end up getting stripped out, as the Attorney General and Senator Johnson and I have a track record of introducing this legislation, we will do that. Or if our Republican colleagues want to take our bills and introduce them without us, we encourage them to do that, because quite frankly, it's past time that we save lives for the people in the state of Wisconsin.
Great, thank you. We do have a hard stop here, so we are going to end here. Thank you all so much for coming. I see there is a question in the chat still. I will make sure to follow up with you directly. But other than that, thank you everyone for coming and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
This program is a production of Wisconsin Eye, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit media network with a mission to inform, educate, and engage the citizens of Wisconsin. Wisconsin Eye is the nation's first and only independently funded state civics broadcast network, providing gavel-to-gavel access to government proceedings and events at the state capitol.